Hello, welcome to another episode of Leadership Live with Anton Gunn. And today we're going to be talking about creating effective goals for leadership in 2025. So these are really how a leader would create effective goals for your team and yourself in 2025. This is really about how we turn vision into action. And so I'm excited to share with you a little bit of insight on what it takes if you really want to achieve those big goals, if you want to achieve any type of goals, how you have an effective process of thinking about those goals. What do you do with those goals? How do you involve your team in that goal process? And you set the table and set the roadmap for you to achieve them in the year of 2025. Because we're at the end of 2024. And last week I told you to kind of reflect on your leadership year, what went well, what didn't go well, what goals you hit, what goals you didn't hit, all of the things that didn't go right, all of the things that you adjusted around, and then most importantly, just kind of taking stock of where you are as a leader and where you are in your organization. So today I want to take the next step in that conversation and talk about 2025. Like you literally have to get focused now in 2024 on what you hope to accomplish and want to accomplish and plan to accomplish in 2025. So today I want to give you 5 insights, if you will, or 5 strategies, if you will. And if you do these in order, it will help you to set and achieve goals in 2025. And sometimes these goals might be super duper big, and sometimes they might be process goals, or things that you want to put in place so that you actually are more effective at achieving those bigger goals. But it doesn't matter what it is, you got to have effective leadership goals for your team. And that's what you really want is a whole framework where you and your team are totally bought in, totally invested, totally inspired, totally motivated, but most importantly, knows what it takes to execute on those goals throughout the calendar year. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you 5 things that you need to focus on, or that you should focus on if you want to create effective goals that allow you to put stuff into action so that you can achieve those goals. So that's what it is today. So let's get started. I'm going to jump right in. Number 1, the first thing that you need to do before you get to thinking about what those actual goals are is you need to define your vision. Now, when I say define your vision, here's what I want you to understand. You have to know what a vision is before you can achieve it. Like you have to be able to see it and to help other people to see it before you can achieve it. So let me break down what a vision is. And this is Anton's definition of vision. And what I mean, my definition, somebody else has probably said it too, but this is how I remember what a vision is. This is how I process what a vision is. A vision is a detailed mental picture of a desired future. I'm going to repeat that. A vision is a detailed mental picture of a desired future. So you have to think about, what is the future that you want? What is the future state that you're trying to achieve? And then secondly, how are you building a mental picture of that desired future or that desired state? And is that picture detailed? Now, when I mean detailed, does everybody on your team understand those details? Can they find themselves in the details? Do they see how they're a part of those details becoming a reality? If you don't create a detailed mental picture of a desirable future, you haven't defined the vision, which means your team won't know how to help you to achieve that vision because you didn't give them a detailed mental picture of that desired future. Now, I know some of you are sitting here thinking, Anton, this is hard. I don't think like that. As a matter of fact, I had a leader share with me that because they're on the spectrum, the neurodiversity spectrum, if you will, that vision is something that they struggle with. They don't really know how to define vision. And that's the reason why I wanted to start here, because I really want to help them understand how to define a vision and what makes a vision. And a vision is just a detailed mental picture of a desired future, a desired future. So let me give you an example of what do I mean, a detailed mental picture of a desired future. So if you worked in a company who sold cell phones, let's just say you sold cell phones, and your detailed mental picture would be the following. We want to be the number one cell phone provider in the United States of America by the end of the year 2025. And how we're going to achieve that is by being the number one cell phone provider in the state of California, in the state of New York, in the state of Florida. And inside those three states, every other person that you meet will have a cell phone that was purchased by us. And in order for us to know how to do that, we will have stores and sales agents in the top 5 markets in each state. That's a detailed mental picture of a desired future. Now, you probably can get a little bit more detailed than that, because if I am in operations, I'm thinking all kinds of questions around how big are these stores, where are these stores, et cetera. But you want to give people just enough of an appetizer, if you will, of that vision that they can see that they're a part of that. Because if you laid out that kind of vision, the marketing team knows what they need to do, the sales team know what they need to do, the operations team know what they need to do. You know, the business end and the finance team they're calculating the numbers. Well, let me see how many people are in that state. There's over 80 million people in that state. So then that means every other person, that's 40 million cell phones we got to sell. You know what our price points are on every cell phone in order for us to be able to choose. So you got to paint that level of vision for your team. You got to define the vision. Now, if you wanted to take this vision conversation and make it personal, you absolutely can make it personal to how do you want to show up as a leader in 2025? What is the vision of your leadership in 2025? So I hope that is helpful to you to understand, define your vision. Now, when I say define your vision in that detailed mental picture, you actually want to write it down. You want to write the vision down. In the good book, Habakkuk 2:2, it says, write the vision and make it plain. Well, I'm telling you right now, you got to write down the vision. You got to become a leader with vision. Write it down, put it on something that everybody can read. And let me be clear, I gave you some details that you said that I said verbally. I want to give you a higher version of that when you write it down. The vision is we want to become the number one cell phone provider in the United States of America by dominating the 3 biggest states and the 5 biggest markets. That's all you need to say. Simple 2-line vision statement that you can get crystal clear and everybody can see where that is. Everybody can figure out who those biggest states are and where the most phones are sold. And I'm just using California, Florida, and New York as an example because I know they're heavily populated, but there might be some smaller states that actually every person has a phone and therefore there's more potential customer base in those other places. But again, you get me on around that detailed mental picture. Now, here's the second point of how you create effective goals is you got to break down that vision into what we call SMART goals or even smarter goals. And I'm going to talk a little bit about smarter goals and SMART goals. And I'm going to start with SMART goals. So here's what a SMART goal is. And I know I'm probably repeating stuff that you heard in every business class that you've ever been in every training or professional development program that you've ever been in. We all know SMART goals. But I don't want to assume that you know SMART goals because sometimes some people hear these words SMART goals and we take it for granted that they actually know what they are. And most people may not know what they are. So I don't want to assume. So SMART goals is SMART. SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, so that S is for specific. The M stands for measurable. The A stands for achievable or attainable. Achievable, attainable. Sometimes they interchange, but let's just say achievable goals. The R stands for relevant goals, and are those goals relevant? The T stands for time bound. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound goals. That's what you're trying to break them down to. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound goals. So if it's specific, you need to say, we're going to be the number one cell phone provider in the United States of America, because specifically, we're going to dominate the West Los Angeles market, or we're going to dominate the San Francisco market. And measurable is how we're going to measure that. Well, there's, 10,000 cell phones sold every day in the market. In order for us to be dominant, we need to sell 5,000 phones. That's measurable. You got a number, 5,000. Achievable. Do you have enough stores in San Francisco in order to sell 5,000 phones? If you know every store sells 100 phones a week, you got to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Now, you heard me mention earlier smarter goals. Well, I want you to keep the SMART as is, but I want you to add 2 more things to make them smarter goals. The E that you would add on smarter, I want it to be exciting. Are these goals that your team is going to be excited about? Because I believe it gets harder to achieve goals that are mundane or rudimentary or punishing goals. You want your goals to be exciting. So sometimes that excitement needs to be some kind of context. Imagine if I'm T-Mobile and we want to become the number one cell phone provider. The exciting is we're going to kick Verizon's butt at the Telecommunications Association annual awards banquet, right? So it's like something simple like that to make it exciting, to make your team motivated around. I have a colleague who has worked with Jersey Mike's for a few years. And one of the things he said in the meeting that kind of revolutionized their thinking is that he said, we're going to kick Subway's butt, because the whole organization before that moment had never thought about kicking Subway's butt. But yet everybody got excited about kicking Subway's butt. And lo and behold, they have kicked Subway's butt, because Subway's is closing stores and Jersey Mike's is opening new stores. So again, make it exciting. Make your goals not just smart, but make them smarter by adding exciting goals in there. Now, here's the R on smarter. The R on smarter is revisable. Now, I'm going to come back and talk about revisable, or why you want to make sure that your goals are not only specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, exciting, but also revisable. Like, you really got to get clear about, we're going to try to achieve this goal, or we're going to achieve this goal. But if we don't get close, let's make sure that it's measurable and specific enough that if we need to revise it, that we can. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. So that's the second thing, is to break your vision down into SMART goals. And you want to create 3 to 5 SMART goals, 3 or 5, up to 5 SMART goals. Don't do more than 5, because that's going to be goal overload. Like, if some people have 10 goals, I even have done this to myself, that gave myself too many goals. I got 10 goals that I wanted to achieve in 2024. And guess what? That was too unrealistic and not necessarily attainable, and bifurcated focus. Diluted focus leads to diluted results. And that's what my friend Rory Vaden says all the time. Diluted focus leads to diluted results. So you got to narrow your focus. So 3 goals is optimal, but at max, you should be able to go up to 5 goals and be okay. Okay. So I made this mistake, and that's why I'm course correcting now, telling you what your goals need to look like for 2025 is break them down into smarter goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, exciting, and revisable. Okay. Now, here's the third thing you want to do if you want to create effective goals for 2024 or 2025 specifically, is you want to align your goals with your team's strengths and challenges. And like everybody uses the word challenges, but I'm going to just say weaknesses. Your team has some strengths and your team has some weaknesses. And you want to align your goals with their strengths and those weaknesses. Why both? Because you want to lean into people's strengths because they thrive in their strengths. They can be productive in their strength. They can get better than some people who are not as strong in those areas. And the reason why you also want to align them with their weaknesses, because everybody on your team, if they're weak in an area, they should be trying to get stronger. And you should be trying to help them to get stronger. So you got to lift up those weaknesses and turn them into less weaknesses or no weaknesses at all. And you want your goals tied back into that. So you want to do that. So how do you do that? How do you align your team, your goals with your team's strengths and weaknesses? Well, you got to talk to your team. So you need to have one-on-one meetings with your team before the end of the year and talk to them about your vision and what do you think their strengths are to contribute to that vision? What do you think their weaknesses are? And you ask them, what do you think is your greatest strength to contribute to this goal, this vision? What do you think your biggest challenge will be to help bring this vision to reality? Just talk about it, process through it. And then inside those goals, you give everybody a game plan or a development plan to help accelerate and accentuate their strengths, but most importantly, to shore up those weaknesses. That's the third thing you need to do, is to align your goals and your vision with your team's strengths and their weaknesses. That's the third thing you need to do. Now, the fourth thing you need to do, and this is really important, this goes back to the R in revisable, is that when you define your effective goals, when you create these effective goals, you want to make sure that you build in flexibility and growth. What do I mean flexibility and growth? Don't make your goals so rigid that when you get hit by a curveball, that you lose all ability to recover, bounce back, respond, innovate, and grow through the adversity of being hit by a curveball. Let me give you an example. Before September 2001, there were a lot of businesses who had some big goals, particularly in the airline industry. We want to build more planes. We want more people flying. We want more people traveling. Our goal is to be the #1 airline in the United States of America or the #1 airline in the world. Those are those goals, right? But then 9/11 happened. 2 planes were crashed into the World Trade Center towers, took them down, and reshaped air travel forever. And for many, many months after 9/11 and many, many years after 9/11, not as many people were flying. Not at all. Some people say, I'm never getting on a plane ever again because I don't want it to be hijacked. I don't want to go through airport security. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. So if you had those goals around certain volume numbers and you stuck with them and didn't revise them, didn't change them up, didn't have any flexibility or any growth opportunity, you didn't hit those goals. And some airplane companies went out of business. Now, if we fast forward to 2020 and we talk about the pandemic, I know I had some speaking goals in 2020 that I wanted to speak 75 times that year and travel around the country giving keynote speeches. Well, the pandemic hit in March of 2020 and nobody was traveling anywhere. And all in-person events got canceled. Most companies stopped all of their meetings. Some people had virtual technology, but most didn't have virtual technology at that point. So they weren't even doing virtual meetings. So my goal of achieving 75 events was shot. So I had to put some flexibility into place and redefine what I call an event. A virtual event was now an event. me going live on Facebook and having an audience of 100 people was an event, because I had to look at it like this: whether I'm in a room with 100 people speaking to them or I got 100 people watching me online, either way, it's still an event. So you got to literally build in some flexibility to allow yourself to bounce back to adversity when you get hit and to grow through it. What did I grow through in that 2020 span? I learned how to use technology in a way that I'd never used before. And now I'm using it on a regular basis, bringing events like this to you, my Leadership Live program, to an audience worldwide, because I now know how to use applications like StreamYard and Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live. As a matter of fact, it took me 6 months to get approved to be able to go live on LinkedIn. So these are the things that you got to build in when you're going through goal setting, vision setting, and planning, is you got to build in some flexibility and some growth, because you could get hit with a curveball. So that is number 4, building some flexibility for growth. Now, number 5, this is really, really important, is that you want to make sure that you measure your progress towards your goals and also celebrate the wins. Celebrate the big wins and the small wins. The reason why this is important is that if what gets measured is what matters. And if you don't measure it, then it don't matter. And if you don't measure it, then you can't manage it. If you don't measure it, you can't make it happen. So a big part of being an effective leader and creating effective goals is figuring out what you're going to measure. What are those key performance indicators? What do you need to achieve by the end of March in the first quarter of 2025 to know that you're on track to achieve those goals by the end of the year? Or have you thought about, like, let's just say you wanted to sell 10 million cell phones in a calendar year, okay? So if you wanted to sell 10 million cell phones, how many do you need to sell every quarter in order to be able to achieve that goal? Well, you might simply lay it out and divide it equally and say, divided by 4, this is what I need to do in each quarter. But that would be a mistake, because you actually know that most people buy new devices around the holidays. So you might book in and say, you know what? I'm going to sell 5,000 of my 10,000 inside the fourth quarter of the year. Okay. And you might say people might get them as gifts. So they'll get whatever the framework is you got to come up with, but you need to set some quarterly goals so that you have these key performance indicators to know whether you're on track, off track, or need to revise that goal. So you got to have those key performance indicators. And if you achieve a mini milestone, celebrate it. Make sure your team celebrates those milestones, because sometimes if you got big, hairy, audacious goals, it can get really hard to go through a whole year and not celebrate something. So you got to find the wins within the wins. Celebrate the small things, even if it is, just showing up to meetings on time, even if it is making sure that we have a game plan, even if it is, those mini steps that you hit along the way towards the big steps. You got to measure your progress. See, these are the 5 things that you need to do, that if you're going to accelerate and turn vision into action, you got to make sure that you're doing these 5 things that I've laid out in this live. And let me repeat them for you. Number 1, you got to define your vision. Number 2, you got to break that vision down into smarter goals. Number 3, you have to align those goals and that vision to your team's strengths and weaknesses. Number 4, you need to build in some flexibility and some growth opportunities inside of that, because you're going to get hit with some curveballs. And number 5, you need to measure your goals, measure your progress, measure your steps, and celebrate those wins. If you do, then you'll do what everybody wants to do, is to turn a vision into reality and be a leader that creates and achieve effective goals for you and your team. So I want you to know that it's been great to share with you this week. I'll see you next Wednesday for another Leadership Live. And I want you to continue to share this message. If you get value out of this, find somebody to share it with, give somebody these insights, help them to be effective as a leader and improve themselves, their team, and their organization. I want to thank y'all for being with me. I'll see you next time for the next episode of Leadership Live with